Hello, my friend from all over the world. My name is Ha. I'm from Vietnam. I was born in a small city called Da Nang, so a coastal city in the middle of the country. Very beautiful place. So if you ever decided to come to Vietnam, please shout out. I would love to see you in person. And in this video, I'm giving you a gift. And if you can use this gift, I can guarantee you that it will change your life for good. This gift doesn't come from me alone. It comes from the contributions of many experts around the world. Okay, so over the past 2 decades, my wife and I asked this question: how one person is really good at something and others are not. So we embarked on a journey of connecting with many experts around the world, of interviewing them and ask them this one question: how have them been growing their ability to think? And because we believe thinking is a fundamental first to help us to change. And if we think right, we think well, we think good, then we can come up with better decisions, and that sets forth for us on a journey of growing. So enjoy the video. I hope that you will connect with these amazing people like we did, learn from them, and most importantly is to practice the sharings that they share in this video for you. Share this video to your friends, to the people around you. Connect with us. Put a like, subscribe to our channel so that we can connect with you more. Now is the time for you to learn from them, not from me anymore. Enjoy.
Bernard and I are very different people. Our perspectives, experiences might seem similar, but we approach the world differently. And sometimes that can be incredibly challenging. But it's always, I leave our conversations thinking differently because I've spent time with somebody who sees the world differently and thinks differently. So expose yourself to people who don't see the world and think the same way you do, and know it's going to drive you crazy and value it at the same time. So that's one thing that came to mind. The other is I read.
Well, it's very similar to the advice I gave your mother about being happy. If you want to set aside time to think, you have to set aside time to think. And what happens is we get so busy doing stuff that we don't set time aside to just think. So one of the things I try to do is just set time aside to do nothing but think.
We live in a world where there is so much information coming at us, and it's really difficult to sift through all of it and kind of make sense of it. But I try to integrate multiple channels, right? In the morning when I do yoga, I watch some of the news on the YouTube. When I cook, I listen to podcasts. When I go for a walk, I listen to books. So I try to multitask and have, and I'm lucky that I'm auditory, so I perceive the information by listening to it. So it allows me to do things physically while listening and absorbing and learning new information. I also encourage everyone to talk to their children, and if you don't have your own, go talk to your neighbors or whoever, because they represent the world of tomorrow. You can learn so much by observing on how they interact with each other, how they.
So in creating our new cohort-based course, which is called A Better Way to Breathe, I have been talking to lots of bereaved people. So I posted on LinkedIn the other day to say that I was creating the course, but I was really mindful that I have my own idea of what might be useful for the students in that course, but my way of expanding my thinking was to make sure that I've done some one-on-one calls with them to check the pulse of where they're at and what would be most useful for them. So I think that is, you really do raise a very important point. We need to think about our thinking, and that is my one way recently of expanding my thinking beyond my own individual bias bubble to make sure that I was hearing external voices and to know that I was creating the course that was most relevant to the outcomes that they were holding dear.
You know, I would pick a word out of what you just said in the last 60 seconds. That's the key. And the word is observe. Observe. You can't think until you observe. What do I see? What do I see that's out of order?
When they send me a story or something that says, hey, this is something that I just learned about. I want to share it with you. So I think the one thing that I would add to Neil's list of things is be willing to share with your colleagues and your friends the things that excite you, the things that give energy and life and meaning to you. I think that's really important because it's a value both to the people that you share it with, but I think it's also a value to me when I share something, or Neil when he shares something with me.
So if you ask me how do you expand the thinking, I think that is really it's by not thinking, by being present and feeling and listening to the intelligence of others, as I said, of the heart, the gut, the body, the space. Talk with other people, of course. Then let it cook, sit with it, see the connections, take it into scenarios, and also ask myself, what is the impossible?
By going and studying topics that do not seem to have anything to do with what I normally focus on. So, my job is to help businesses and people be more successful. I focus mostly on things like leadership and strategy and teamwork, but I do from time to time read physics and cosmology and poetry and history, things that are far out of the realm of what I normally focus on. And it's surprising how often that something in an obscure area of poetry will influence the way I think about something that I do in my work every day.
Reading. Giving myself time to think.
Wow.
You can't leave it in the back of your mind while you do other things. You have to put pen to paper or to type up ideas that you can then reread and challenge. I believe in the power of doing that. So having dedicated time to just ponder some of the bigger questions is important. And then testing out with, you need to have a few good advisors or mentors or colleagues that you can share your ideas and your challenges with, see what they think of the possible answers you are thinking about, see how they might augment your own thought process as well, see how they might challenge you, and maybe they bring up things you had not thought about. But I think that this is also a very important step in keeping up with our own personal growth.
Exposing yourself to radically different ideas is helpful. And a case study I read that kind of spells this out for me is, there's a few. One is there was a hospital where they were having lots of problems when a patient came in for surgery, kind of going from the nurse to the doctor, back to the nurse. They were messing things up. And so they'd take the patient, they go from one room to the next, they'd leave stuff in the patient, they'd have all these problems and infections. And they thought, how can we think about changing this? And what they did is they wound up going and bringing a Formula One racing pit crew in. and they had the pit crew evaluate what they were doing, because in a pit crew, like in these races, the car comes in, you have no time at all to get all the tires off, get the car ready, get it back out there, and if you make a mistake, the car's going to crash. Yeah. And in the hospital, they're doing all these handoffs between different doctors and nurses, and they were messing things up, and by looking at how the pit crew did their work and having the pit crew look at how they did work, they brought in these outside ideas that let them think differently and greatly reduce the number of, accidents that happen in their hospital. And I think looking outside what you're doing is really important. I know in our area, one of the first banks to be really consumer friendly was Commerce Bank. And what their CEO said is, I'm not looking at other banks. Consumers don't say, this is a bank, that's how they should be. I'm looking at Target, I'm looking at Starbucks, I'm looking at all the companies that consumers love interacting with and saying, how can I be at that level?
One of the concepts I teach is intelligent curiosity. You can learn to be better at being curious. Curiosity is just wanting to know. Intelligent curiosity is knowing what to search for, how to think, how to ask questions. What sort of questions should you ask? How do you solve problems? What kind of problem is it? Where did it come from? Who does it affect? What are the possibilities? What other things contribute to it? Does it indicate something else? Like when you go to a doctor and you say it hurts right here. Well, you don't want a pill to make the hurt go away. You want the doctor to tell you why it hurts and make that go away. Yeah. Then you don't need the pill, right? So the same thing's true in intelligent curiosity, which I co-authored with a woman named Lisa Patrick, who was at one time a private investigator. Yeah. Which makes for a pretty interesting approach. But that's, it's looking for what comes out of that golden egg. Intelligent curiosity.
Wow, beautiful. The intelligent curiosity, yes.
Is be conscious in your thinking, be conscious of whether you need to be thinking conceptually about the main idea, strategically about how to use the idea, or tactically about the steps in using the idea. Because concept, strategy, tactics, that's 3 levels, and some problems can be solved at the tactical level. Some need to be solved at a strategic level, and some at a concept level. So that's another form of thinking discipline that you can learn and get better at.
One of the things is allowing yourself time to think. We don't give ourselves time to reflect on ourselves. We reflect on so many other people, but we don't give ourselves time and space to think. Going out, being in nature, taking time to walk amongst the trees or the gardens or whatever it is, the valleys. Taking time to just be by yourself is a rarity nowadays. So it's giving yourself that gift of time to think about yourself. And you can do it in a structured way, but you can just make sure you're actually thinking about you and where you want to go on this journey. Because if you are thinking about that, I know it sounds so self-indulgent, but if you are thinking about yourself in that way and how you can serve the world and how you can serve the people immediately in front of you, it allows you to then say, here's where I need to go next and how I can best be of service. So it's giving the gift of thinking space to yourself without thinking that it's an indulgence that you can't afford. You really need to think about yourself and where you want to go next. So I think it's giving yourself allowing yourself to think and the time and getting off all the devices to do so. I think that's a big thing. And that's what I had when I was growing up. I had time. I allowed myself to think about and see myself in the future and imagine myself where I want to be and seeing myself looking out back on that experience. So not just seeing, me out there as an out-of-body experience, but me seeing the audience, me interacting with the cameras and being that person. So I think a lot of it is visualization, which think our brains see it and then, okay, that is a possibility for that person. So those are the things that I'd recommend, is definitely giving yourself space.
I think it is a willingness or even a desire to be wrong. So if I'm wrong, I will learn something. So I often, as I said earlier, will get involved in research or even, for that matter, activities in which I know almost nothing. But I'll try to surround myself with people who do know a lot about it, and I can absorb that information, and then I can practice, I can learn, I can make mistakes. So I tell my graduate students, that my dream every day in my lab is that they will tell me that I've made a mistake. Right? That's my chance to learn something. So that trying new things and failing is a wonderful opportunity to get better and sharpen your thinking.
People have approximately 60,000 to 80,000 thoughts per day. And approximately 80% of these 60 to 80,000 thoughts are negative. And if you eliminate the negativity out of your world, so if you have your values aligned, if you live by them, if you're surrounded by people who share your values, who are driven by the same values as you are, then this, I would say, like 60-70% of the negativity falls off. So we eliminate a huge chunk of negativity. This is one thing. The second thing is, of course, there are a lot of things that that shake you, that throws you out of your whatever path you have chosen. Then you have to know how to calm yourself down. I meditate a lot, right? I meditate each day, every day, for 20 years now, and I can say it is very helpful for me. Then surround yourself with animals. We have 3 dogs, 2 horses, and when we do workshops and business transformation cycles, etc., we always try to do a part of it outdoors with equine assisted workshops or canine assisted workshops and coachings and psychotherapies, etc. So animals are great assistant, actually. So this would be like my 3 top choices for you to try out. But these are mine, right? This helps me. You have to find whatever energizes you.
One of the most important things I believe we can do is to communicate, and to communicate to listen and to understand. It's not about talking at people, it's about listening and their point of view, because one of the things I always talk about is perception. Perception is unique. It's a unique to only us, therefore it's unique, and it's our personal reality. So for instance, you're both looking at me on this screen now, and you will be thinking about me differently. And you'll be thinking about me differently because that will be based, your perception of me will be based upon your experiences so far. And your experiences are unique to only each of you. So what you see and hear will be different. But neither of you are wrong. You're both right. So our perception is our only reality. And I think that is, once we understand that everybody is going to listen, hear us differently, see us differently, we start to understand perhaps that there is no one way. And we start to think more. We start to think about that person with a bit more compassion, and the next person and the next person and the next person. So we are thinking about what they might be thinking, and they are right to them. So I think to understand how I actually evolve in the way I think, it is by being very aware of how different people's perceptions are, and to communicate to the point where I ask enough questions to understand better rather than assume too much. So but because communication is the basis of everything. So by thinking like that, we're learning all the time, and that is what the way I would answer that question.
I read at least a book a week and have for probably the last 30 years.
Okay.
And so curiosity is the answer.
Curiosity.
What don't I know? What can I learn that will make me more effective? And you start to realize that, after you've read a lot of books, and the placeholder behind you, interestingly, is a whole bunch of books, and you start to pick up themes and ideas that are consistent, and they change you. And one of the things that I've done for the last 30 years is whenever I read a book that's nonfiction. So first of all, I read mostly. I don't really make time to read fiction, although there's nothing wrong with fiction. I just tend to lean into nonfiction. I will write all over my book, and then I will type up notes that I can read later. And so I'll just show you. This is just a small sample of book summaries that I have for every book that I've read over the last 25, 30 years. So what happens is, when I go on an airplane and I'm traveling, I'll take 10 of those with me, just go through them. And it reinforces, you don't remember everything that you read in a book, but I have the notes of what I thought was most important, and it's changed me, And by the way, I take those and I give them to people so that it's not just, because it's a time-intensive thing.
Yeah.
But when I give them to other people, particularly people who work for me, I'm influencing them. So it's a benefit for me to say, hey, I read the book, I typed up the notes, would you like them? And people are like, yeah, I don't have to spend all those hours that you did, sure, But now I'm sharing information, and now I'm having a conversation with someone about something that I read. So we're reinforcing it, and they're going, well, what about this? And so curiosity is the answer.
Do you really know what matters most? And that would be my biggest advice for anybody in terms of teaching critical thinking. And my second thing is, it's very interesting as people come to us and say, my team doesn't think critically. We hear that all the time. I don't know, they just don't have it. They don't have that competency. Most of the time when I dig underneath that, it's that they don't have enough strategic information to think critically. So really making sure people understand your business. If you want them to think, make sure they get it, and how you make money, and why your values matter, and what your brand is for your customers. Because if you say, I find that even with our own team, sometimes they'll want to do something, and I'm like, no, but that's my fault. If they think that's a good idea, then that's my fault, because they don't fully understand really where we're headed. And so I have to own that to help them think more critically.
I love learning from other people. I love following and the opportunity to be expanded in my thinking. This journey with Healing at Work has been an incredible journey of learning and the research of, using some of the science of neuroplasticity and positive psychology to help shape how people think consciously and unconsciously at work has been really powerful. And I'm always on a journey of learning. That's why the book's called Healing at Work. It's a lifelong journey of healing and learning how we can manage ourselves differently, in much more positive and productive ways. So yeah, it's an excellent question. I think I have to think more about thinking.
Colleagues who disagree with me, that and who give pushback. The one of the best things about working with Jeff and Andy, and there's monthly live stream I host along with the two of them and Amanda McCulloch. Amanda is the executive director of the Data Visualization Society, is we don't agree on everything. And but we will debate these things and say, well, here's why I feel differently about this, and force me to reconsider and go, you know what? That's a really valid point. I hadn't considered that before. So the growth comes from keeping an open mind and just kind of recognizing when being closed to these things have harmed me. That I think I was much less flexible and more, what's the word that I'm looking for? Intractable 10 years ago, 12 years ago. And I thought I had all the answers, and no, I don't. So you want good colleagues who will give you pushback, and you want people to find the flaws. You want people to find the errors. There's a really good quote at the end of the book, Mistakes Were Made, but Not by Me. I'm sorry I can't remember who the authors are, but it's going to take too long. I almost know certainly where the book is right behind me and can probably find the quote, but essentially it is saying, the people who point out your flaws or the things, they're your most, their greatest benefactors. They're helping you grow. They're helping you get better.
Take different domains, different areas, and be able to see connections. Like, just kind of as I've been describing to you, it's like, what can I learn from this scientific article that I kind of, I don't understand, it's not my area, but what can I learn from that thinking and how they applied that to what I'm working on? So, how do we kind of bring in different viewpoints and just challenge ourselves to see connections, was another one. And then, interestingly, we hear all the time about, the importance of, physical exercise, for example. But our brains need cardiovascular exercise. So, there are illnesses like dementia, for example, is a cardiovascular thing. Our brains need us to exercise to be healthy and optimal. So I gave kind of a whole bunch of different things of how to kind of create this. But those are a couple that come to mind.
So I might change the word think to reflect.
Okay.
Because that's really what I think I do in order to make decisions and understand where I'm going next and to slow down. And so, for example, I have this blog on Psychology Today, and it's focused on, it's called A New Look at Women's Leadership. And I was writing for maybe a year and a half constantly. And then the pandemic hit and the racial reckoning in the US. And I started really thinking and reflecting on that. And I started wondering, what is the message that I want to send here? Is this the right message? Is this still the right platform? I really started questioning myself a lot. I started thinking, what is a woman? What is women's leadership? Leadership is leadership. Why am I making it about gender? All of these questions I had to sit with for quite a while, and I spun and I read a lot, and I asked a lot of people's thoughts, and I just stopped writing. I went into kind of a writing cocoon because I did not want to continue without having more clarity about where I wanted to take this and whether this was the right path. So
I emerged a couple of times with, a couple of pieces, but the entire process probably took 2 years for me to get to more clarity. And I wrote more mostly to get feedback and to see what resonated for people and what it was that people were concerned about versus not, and what it was that I reacted to. So sometimes the thinking and reflecting process takes a really, really long time. Other times it takes less time, but I think building in time in your schedule to sort of reflect on your own and then to reflect with other people makes an enormous difference on making sure that you don't feel like you're reacting to everything, but rather being a lot more proactive, intentional, and thoughtful.
Expanding my thinking usually just involves, bringing in new ideas. So, talking to people who have different experiences, reading books. When I do the Strength Finder, one of my strengths is input, and another one is ideation. So I love new ideas, and I love gathering information. So it's really one of those things that is natural for me, is to be curious and to seek out new ideas and new information. So what I try to do is to build that into my habits. So I try to create habits where I have a routine where I expose myself to new information, and that's what seems to work for me. In my case, because I love new information so much, I actually have to make sure that my habit includes stopping. So, because sometimes I can, especially now with the internet, you can get too much information, and so I actually have to kind of manage the amount of information, because I can spend too much time doing things that are just ideas. And an idea is a valuable thing, but only when it turns into action. Only when it turns into action. So I have to try to bring a balance between thinking and doing. Doing is the most important part.
Wow.
Because we get caught up, there is so much information out there, so much. And I'm guilty of absorbing it as well. I think sometimes at night, I just let my mind go. Our mind is just noise, right? It's just noise. And I think it's not, we all think it's our thinking, but it's noise. If we could start to separate that noise from who we are. And I think for me, over the last year, my podcasts have kept me so relevant with the people that I have interviewed and spoken to, that it's opened up so much. Try something new.
Wow.
Your thinking will shift.
Yep.
Everybody I speak to has a different story and a different conversation. And I have to be there to ask the questions. So I think thinking, most people, it's about being, right? There's having, doing, and being. Most people are in the having and the doing rather than the being. How can we just be? Which is a Buddhist philosophy.
I love
diverse perspectives and ideas and domains. So one of the things I try to do that I think then in turn helps me think more rigorously and become more curious is expose myself to things I don't know anything about. And that was why actually consulting was really a good fit for me, because you have to become an expert in whatever the client wants or needs at any given moment. But for example, like I love to get newsletters where there's like sections on like random interesting things, or we have a Slack channel at work called Readful where like people will just post things and whatever they're reading, and it's such a diverse group of employees and they're all over the world that there's things I would never stumble into myself. But what I find is that, again, like introducing myself to those new ideas, I start to see patterns. I start to like challenge assumptions underlying like the way that I was taught about something. Like one thing I've been doing, I had a sabbatical in August, and I went to Greece for that month, and I decided to just like read a lot of Buddhism and things like that, because I'm so steeped on a day-to-day basis in Western culture, and I just was like, I want to challenge some of my core principles about like what is a good life, what is happiness, what is and I think that just like constantly introducing new ideas to force you to really think about your thinking and about your knowledge base, and like it allows you to get more rigorous about it.
Pretty much with anything, you get better by doing it. And I think when it comes to thinking, you actually have to think, right? Like kind of, if you want to get better at writing, you have to write. I think if you want to get better at thinking, you have to think about what you're thinking and why you think that way, because it's so easy to just use shortcuts, right? And just make connections based on your previous assumptions and what you believe to be true. And I think what I try to do, and I read a lot, so I feel like I'm constantly being bombarded by stuff, is I ask myself, like, why should I believe this person? Like, what is it that, whether it's my own experience, whether it's what they're saying, whether it's the arguments they're using, it's like, why should I believe it? Maybe that's
Thinking is important. I think that, taking time out of the day to really just shut your eyes and not meditate, but really think about what you're doing and why you're doing it, and what is the strategy behind what you're doing, I think is really important. And I think we need to do it each and every day, because if we don't, we get caught in the busyness rather than strategicness of what we're trying to accomplish. And I think thinking doesn't go without strategy. I mean, I think you can think a lot, but if you're not strategic about what you're thinking about, you can get lost in the weeds and you can waste a lot of time. And we only have 24 hours in a day. But I think for some people, depending on what type of personality they are, they get caught in the thinking and they never take the necessary action. And so I think it's a fine balance and an integration of truly understanding who you are and at your core of what you can accomplish. I am most happy when I'm executing. But some people like to be in that thinking, right? And their analysis, but then you get analysis by paralysis, right? So I think it's important. I think we have to be careful that we don't fall into that line of we're thinking too much and not taking enough action, or we're taking too much action but we're not being strategic about what we're doing. And so it's really like a teeter-totter, and it's a fine balance between them, but I think one is equally as important as the other.
Before you go to bed, ask yourself, how might I do whatever I'm trying to do? And especially if I had all the money in the world, all the resources in the world, or in fact, I had a magic wand and I could do anything I want, okay? And then well, two things. The time before you sleep, sometimes you have a great imagination. And you'll be surprised that sometimes when you sleep, you come up with ideas and solutions. Put a notepad by your bed and write them down when you wake up. Like, yeah, I came up with this interesting new solution or this new business idea. And, you know, sometimes, oh God, this is really stupid. But sometimes you'll come up with some of your best, craziest, funnest ideas during both the time before you fall asleep and when you when you dream. And write them down when you wake up.
People have approximately 60,000 to 80,000 thoughts per day. And approximately 80% of these 60 to 80,000 thoughts are negative. And if you eliminate the negativity out of your world, so if you have your values aligned, if you live by them, if you're surrounded by people who share your values, who are driven by the same values as you are, then this, I would say, like 60-70% of the negativity falls off. So we eliminate a huge chunk of negativity. This is one thing. The second thing is, of course, there are a lot of things that, you know, that shake you, that throws you out of your whatever path you have chosen. Then you have to know how to calm yourself down. I meditate a lot, right? I meditate each day, every day for 20 years now. And I can say it is very helpful for me. Then surround yourself with animals. We have 3 dogs, 2 horses, and when we do, workshops and business transformation cycles, etc., we always try to do a part of it outdoors. With equine assisted workshops or canine assisted workshops and coachings and psychotherapies, etc. So animals are great assistant actually. So this would be like my 3 top choices for you to try out. But these are mine, right? This helps me. You have to find whatever energizes you.
I'm not very good at meditation, but I've been doing it every day for 11 or 12 years. And I think that, again, I don't want to be tactical about this because it's not tactical at all. I just sort of feel myself, the ability to give myself a chance to be more present in the moment, to be more aware. That's it, you know. I think that's been helpful, but it's not tactical. Like I hate the question. Oh, like how does it feel when you meditate? Or like, oh, I tried meditation for a week and it's like I feel this or I feel that. Like I don't care about any of those things. It's just trusting the process, and I know over time, you know, I've noticed a different disposition, and I recognize that we all have human brains. It's like the example of going to sleep feeling one way and waking up another. We don't have full control. And so really it's the part 2 of your question is that I think a lot about, you know, what my thoughts are resisting. And if I can summon the awareness to be more present with what I'm resisting and lean into what I'm resisting and accept it and notice it and observe it, I can make better choices based on that. That's been huge for my thinking.
Yeah, that's a funny question to me because I've always been a thinker. And for me, I think tapping into the wisdom that's beyond my mind has been important. I like to think about the wisdom of the body, the wisdom of the emotions, the wisdom of the spirit or intuition. And I think that for a lot of people that work in the corporate world, that they rely way too heavily on only, you know, their mind. And I think it's important to sometimes step back or, you know, quiet the mind so that you can tap into, like, how am I feeling? You know, what does my gut tell me? You know, what does my intuition tell me? A lot of times our mind, our rational mind, will override wisdom that we have in our emotions, in our body, in our intuition. And I think that when we can bring all four of those wisdoms together, so the mind, the emotions, the body, and the, you know, spirit or intuition, that's where we can find a more, I think, authentic and happier path forward. Because the conscious mind can be somewhat of a tyrant sometimes, like really overriding some of these more delicate ways of you know, tapping into wisdom. And I think that those other areas or those other ways of, you know, thinking, I'd say wisdom, those other areas of wisdom are quieter but wiser. We need to tap into that.
I'm always looking at where my blind spots are. And I use a tool called the Johari window. And I can send you in the show notes or whatever makes sense. But the Johari window, I teach this to leadership teams across the world. And if I don't use it myself, I'm a bit of a hypocrite, right? So I use it to understand and try to understand, where am I not paying attention to? What feedback am I getting that I need to address and that I don't want to address, that I'm scared to address? Why am I scared to address it? And then I go deeper and I ask myself some discovery questions. So I'm always looking at where I can improve, where I can enhance my capabilities. And I don't mean just more accolades and more qualifications. I mean self-improvement. And so for me, becoming aware of some of those triggers that I have and some of those things that hold me back. You know, I sometimes look in the mirror and I you know, Mel Robbins, I don't know if you know Mel Robbins' work, but, you know, just high five yourself in the mirror, right? Yep. Show yourself that you love yourself.
I would say that the thought that has helped me grow the most is realizing that if I have the mindset and believe something can happen, whether it be specific to a conflict, like this conflict is going to be resolved, even when I don't know the path to get there, the believing it helps me to see and, you know, have that vision and perception. The other piece, so the believing I'm going to fix and resolve this even when I have no idea how to do it, will get me there. That determination. Second is, I would say, I'm trying to think what would be the most important, because of course I have quite a few. I still think that's the most important one, the believe that it will happen. And I think awareness of perspective. And I call it like change your view, where many of us will say, I might say to someone, you know, we need to like look at that objectively. And someone will go, well, I am looking at it objectively, which is very difficult to do because we're all subjective people. We bring our experiences. But finding ways to be more objective has helped me see things in broader perspectives and figure out where to focus when I need to focus. And I kind of do it like put myself in the balcony, so to speak. It's figurative, but physically, like thinking of yourself in the balcony and looking at all the things that are in front of you and seeing that broader perspective and then focusing. Because a lot of times we focus too much where, you know, I'll have someone come and go, I can't work with that person. And they're so focused on that one bad conversation. And then I'll just say, well, you've been working with them for 25 years, you know, broadening. So let's talk about, you know, what has gone well and what changed. So it's that broadening and the broad perspective and the focus and figuring out how to balance that and use both.
are key.
That's a really great question. I think I'm naturally curious. I'm curious about how things work, about why people do the things that they do, behave the way that they do, and what we can do about it. So I think I allow myself to be led by my curiosity, but then I'm asking a lot of questions. I'm reading a lot of different things, and whether it's fiction or nonfiction, I'm trying to, or the news, I'm trying to learn. And then it's in that processing phase, thinking critically about what does this actually mean? What are the implications of it? And then, so what can we do about it? So I think I'm always looking at many angles of life from that perspective.
Thanks for sharing that. So naturally, a curious person asking, a lot of questions to, connecting the things, right? And then reading and learning constantly, so they grow your thinking, and then be intentional in your thinking through the critical question, critical thinking, and
what works for me is doing some reflection and like on an ongoing basis, like being able to, sometimes it's just like looking at the end of the day and saying, okay, what worked well in this day? But if I could do today all over again, what would I do differently? And so, having the ability to sit back, slow down our thinking. Sometimes we're in so much of a rush, we don't do this. But being able to slow things down and be able to take stock of, what are we grateful for in this moment? What is an area of opportunity that we might want to focus on tomorrow? I take that reflection to an annual basis as well. And there's, I don't know if you've heard of something called, it's called 10Q.
No.
And it's 10 questions at the end of 1 year that you basically answer a question every day. They're all reflective questions. Like, for example, what was your greatest achievement over this year? What is the one thing, or what is the one person you want to build a relationship with next year? And so it's like reflective, but it forecasts. And what happens is you get a question every day. It's a different question every day. There's only 10 in the series. And what happens at the end of the 10 questions is your responses are locked in a vault. And then what happens the next year, like a whole year later, the vault is unlocked and you get your answers back. And so you can actually reflect back and you can see, okay, was I on track with some of those things? Like the things that I said I would develop over the next 12 months? Did I do those things? Well, why didn't I do those things? And it's a great way to take stock of what's important in your life, where do you want to make some shifts or changes or developments. And then when you see all of your answers unlocked 12 months later, like you almost forget about what you put in, right? Because it was a whole year before. But it just brings to the surface, okay, yeah, here are the areas that I was able to change my thinking on, or I was able to develop. Here are some areas where maybe I'm still stuck. And it is a great way to shine a spotlight on those things, the things that you want to celebrate, but then the things that maybe are so challenging that they require additional attention. So I would say that's probably like 2 ways that, I just continue to evolve my own thinking, and certainly conversations with individuals like yourself, where you're learning new things, you're hearing new perspectives, you're receiving new insights. Those are all things that influence how you approach the world, how you show up in this life. And again, those things are not events either. We don't just stop learning. Like, we need to continue evolving our ways of thinking. We need to keep evolving our skills and, developing areas in our life, so that we continue to, feel fulfilled, experience new things. That's what life's all about.
Thank you very much.
I guess first is open mind, trying not, although it's hard sometimes, to be too judgmental, to give the benefit of the doubt before you make your decision or your judgment about something or someone. I don't think anyone who can travel the world and see other cultures can enjoy it unless you have an open mind and accept there are other ways of doing things, even other ways of thinking about time, for example, or about how you treat the elderly, or whatever the topic might be. So open mind and not too judgmental. I think it's important to develop your skill of lateral thinking, not to be funneled, have your thinking funneled into one direction, but to open your mind and look for relationships that might add to your understanding of a situation. And I guess the third thing I would say is I'm a glass half full person. I usually try to see the positive in situations, the positive in people, until proven otherwise. And I like to be very optimistic in taking my approach to any business opportunity or any personal relationship, until I'm shown that maybe I was wrong or maybe I should adjust my thinking. There's a great quote that I've used in speeches before, and it's ascribed sometimes to Abraham Lincoln, but I'm not really sure. And he was asked, what's the difference between a pessimist and an optimist? And he said, a pessimist sees the difficulty in every opportunity, while an optimist sees the opportunity in every difficulty. And I guess I've developed a way of thinking very optimistically.
Wow, that's an interesting question. I think, remember when I told you about half full, about how I see things in a positive manner? I think that I probably, if I went to school now, I would probably be diagnosed as maybe having attention deficit. And but when I went to school, people just said, read it again and pay attention. But I had to learn how to read things 3 times. I had to learn how to shut out all the exterior noises and sounds. And so I've conditioned my mind to be very focused, because I can't succeed like I think I'm a normal person, if there's something called normal there. And so I consider it a blessing, because I had to work that much harder to be able to read and comprehend, to be able to study, that I'm conditioned that way. To this day, when my wife comes in and I'm writing something and she starts talking, my hand goes up. That means I can't hear you and do this and get back to where I am. I must stay here. And she knows that. I promise, I'm fun to be around. but I think what could be defined as a deficit, as a difficulty, in a sense became an asset for me, because it's the only way I could succeed in school.
Diana, how have you been expanding your ability to think?
I think that the most frequent way is reading. The more you read, the more you start to ask yourself important, provocative questions like, is this true? How do I know it's true? What other conclusion could I come to besides the conclusion this author is trying to lead me to? What's fact and what's opinion? Just as you read, it improves your thinking process. A second way, other than just reading, I think, is to go to very smart people and ask them questions about what you intend to do, your plan. I wrote a blog once on thinking, how to think better, and one of the points in that was to pretend that you have a board of directors. You may literally have a board of directors to go to, but if you're an entrepreneur and you don't have or you're just starting out and you don't have this group of people, imagine you did. Imagine you were on the board of directors. When somebody would present an idea to you, what would you ask them? What would you ask them about their financing? What would you ask them about their staff? What would you want to know about their plans in the future? What would you want to know about their marketing? If you would think like an advisor and think like you're a person, if you're starting a new project or product or service, what would a board of directors ask me? And then prepare yourself. That helps you to think through any kind of project, any kind of plan that you want to do, even if it's financial planning for your family or planning how to build character into your kids. That thought process comes from reading in many subject areas and applying maybe in different ways, but it also comes from your ability to listen to good advice and listen to feedback and apply it in your situation.
That's a great question, and I've never sort of thought about how I think, to be honest. But I think I try to keep it as simple as possible and as close to the ground as possible. Because at least my experience has been, if you can articulate things, if you can make things simple, then the clarity of thought becomes really, really good. So I try to keep it as simple as possible. And I think people say, just tell me in one sentence what you think, and that's the most difficult thing. And I think we have to think a lot about how to keep things simple. So in my view, simplicity is something which I'm trying to learn as I think and about the thought process.
Wow. So simplicity is a luxury now because things around us so complicated, right? So tell us a tip or two about how you can make things to a very simple way.
So I think that's where a lot of reflection, a lot of thought, a lot of thinking about the pros and cons are very, very important. And I think after thinking very, very deeply about something, you can sort of think a little bit simpler and articulate those sort of things. So I think it needs a lot of thought process, a lot of reflection to keep things simple.
Absolutely. One last question. There's a whole universe between thinking and the whole universe about doing. And people always say, some people hold the ground that thinking is more important, or some people will say doing is more important. Personally to you, which one is more important and why?
We just recently completed a strategy exercise of the company. And the strategy exercise was about what to do and what not to do, which needed a lot of thinking. So if you have to go north, you cannot go south in the same direction. So it was about, okay, you have so many options, and what is it that you want to do in the next 5 years? So this related to the vision and strategy, but I think strategy is as good as the execution of the strategy. So you can think, but I think most important is the execution of what you think. And I think this is where we have to keep things simple and focus on just those things which have the highest impact. Because if you try to do 10 things or 20 things, in my view, then you cannot execute. So if you think of 2-3 things or 5 things, prioritize what is the most important thing which is going to have the highest impact, and then focus on execution. So thinking and doing, I think they go hand in hand.
Hand in hand. Alrighty. Thank you so much, Sanjay.
Thank you
very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So Maya, over these years, how have you been helping you to improve your ability to think?
always seek opinions of those who I don't agree with on the surface level. I'm constantly challenging myself by getting input from some individuals that perhaps I'm not seeing their standpoint, I'm not understanding fully their arguments, and I'm trying to learn from them by listening first and foremost. I think that nowadays the social media is really doing us a great disservice, because what's happening is we're constantly looking for to solidify our own opinions, right? And when we solidify our own opinions, the algorithms are then helping us, quote unquote helping us. They're not helping us. They're constantly feeding us with the material of our preference. And then what ends up happening is we're not expanding our horizons. We're not improving our thinking. Now, I'm not saying seek an opinion of someone who's so vastly different from you that you're going to end up in some sort of a horrific argument. I'm not saying that per se, but let's say you're having some sort of philosophical debate and you're not seeing something quite clearly as that other individual. That is the person you want to talk to. Because if you're consistently having a room full of people that agree with you, neither one of you are growing, and no one is really thinking. All we're doing is validating each other's opinion.
Wow, how I've been expanding my ability to think. That's such a big question, and I feel pressured to answer it in a big and lofty way, and that's not disappointing. I think one way that I've been trying to think about this, to sort of expand my ability to think, is truly to slow down. This is really advice that's come from one of my favorite collaborators, Cassie Holmes, and it's work that other people have talked about as well. But making time for deep thinking, versus sort of fast thinking, if you will. There are a lot of things that pop up in my everyday life that seem urgent, and I can sort of do quick responses to, and I often have to stop myself from just digging into the urgent and slowing down so that I have the ability to actually think and to your quote, expand my ability to do that. And it's hard, it's really hard, because I feel like when you get to a certain point in life, it's like I've got little kids and I've got my work and family, and there's so many different things going on that it's easy to kind of do like a little bit here and there, a little bit there, and and I have to keep reminding myself to sort of slow down and try to just focus on one thing, because that results in deeper, more expansive thinking, if you will.
Beautiful, beautiful.
Over the years, how have you been expanding your own way of thinking, David?
Well, I think that I'm always interested in the news, so I'm always reading newspapers, credible sources. I'm a guard, credible sources. But within that, I would say that critically thinking is absolutely important. Asking myself, so when I find something interesting or challenging, I will ask, who's written that? What may have been their motivation? What might have been their bias? What might this be trying to make me think? So not just absorbing that. So I'd say that reading as much as I can, but critically thinking about the motives of the author is really important as well. Never trying to be too easily influenced one way or another, believing that the truth is always somewhere in the middle, in the grey, even with some of the most extreme voices in the media and in the public eye. I will always try to think generously about what may be their truth, and not try to dismiss too readily even what might seem like the most extreme views. Always trying to maintain a level of balance, I think keeps me sane, as well as helps me think better.
Wow. How have you been helping yourself to expand your ability to think over the years?
Yeah, no, so basically, one of the things that I do is that I love to read. So I'll be completely honest, as somebody who learned how to speak English as a second language, I am not a very fast reader with a physical book. So what I do is I do audiobooks. So audiobooks are becoming, I think, very, very popular. 30% at least of the people actually use audiobooks. So I listen to a lot of books, whether it's like I mentioned, Marshall, Sally, Dory, all of the different people in my community that write that are so amazing, Daniel Kahneman. And I also read a lot of articles. And it's very interesting because that was not, how do I say, reading and writing is something that I did, but now I do it with intent. Like I want to be better. I want to be inspired. And you're only inspired by the people, again, you surround yourself with, by the people you put in your network and the books and the, whether it's the movies that inspire you. But I feel like having that as part of your everyday life is very, very important. Podcasts or however you learn, if you'd like to read or listen, I always advise people to find a way to integrate learning and inspiration into their everyday life.
So over the years, Dennis, how have you been expand your ability to think?
Well, I love reading. I love reading about history and historical figures who have done remarkable things. My wife and I went to live in Rome for 3 months this past year, last spring, and I just loved reading and then visiting all these historical sites where these great orators, these great soldiers, great engineers building aqueducts and roads and sanitation and so on. I find reading history inspiring. I'm reading a book about Thomas Edison right now, who had 1,100 patents and thousands of inventions. And I love the book on Leonardo da Vinci, or some of the artists like Donatello or Botticelli or Michelangelo. I find the Renaissance period particularly fascinating. But I'd say reading is a very, very useful thing to expand your mind, to help you think. Another thing I do a lot of is I love meditating. I don't have a lot of time for it, but I meditate at least 5 minutes a day, sometimes 10 minutes, sometimes 15. It just depends on what I have. I use an application called Calm, C-A-L-M, but there's another one out there called Headspace, and there's more. So I think they help you organize yourself, and sometimes they have little lectures, or sometimes, but there's the effect of doing a little bit of meditation, being mindful of where you are in life and in space, and it's something I recommend highly. Also, it helps you be grateful or have gratitude towards what you've been able to accomplish and be involved with. And so I think there's a couple of things there that might be useful. Working hard is fun and interesting, but you have to give a little bit of breaks too. So I love to run and ride bicycles and hike, and I swim and I sail boats, and so you have to have some pursuits that give you some time away from work so that you actually can enjoy life too. So that's a couple of thoughts I've had.
So over the years, how have you helped yourself to grow your ability to think?
First of all, I don't think it's all about doing. You have to think first. If you think first, you don't want people to be doing a lot of things without thinking. That's dangerous. Yeah. So I also believe everything starts with knowledge and words. You understand, you make meaning of concepts, and you have to think about it and process it before you can apply things and do them. So there is a process, to transformation. You start with your mind, right? And our minds are extremely powerful. And the processing of that is so important. So I'm always learning new things. So I think, and I'm always challenging things. So when I listen to things that people tell me, I constantly criticize, or not criticize what they're saying, but I critique it. I critique, is this true? Is that your opinion? Is that fact? And then I will research to find out if what they're saying is validated by other information. So I'm constantly critically analyzing the barrage of information that we're getting every single day. Fake news. I don't take all the news of what people say as fact. Absolutely not. In fact, I assume it's probably biased. All the things that are happening in politics in the world, I assume that the truth is somewhere in between the extreme left, the extreme right view, and both are sharing, like they're looking at the elephant from their perspective, but they don't see the full elephant, So I really strive to look to see as many perspectives as I can to see the elephant. And I think none of us can see the full elephant, right? From all perspectives, right? Because some of us are seeing it from the back and we only see the tail. Some of us see it from the front and only see the trunk. And both are not wrong, because from their perspective, there's a trunk and a tail. So I think the idea and knowledge and thinking, critical thinking, is such an important part in perspectives. So I travel around the world so I can understand different perspectives. I've been to North Korea, and I'm criticized for going to North Korea. And they say, why do you go there? I say, because I want to understand how they see the world and their perspective. I want to think critically about, before I make decisions, I want to understand, are you seeing the tail or the trunk? Because I can assert that my view is correct, and I can argue that it's a trunk. If I don't even realize, or have the wisdom to realize that you're standing in the back and you see the tail, then it's foolishness. So that's why I spend a lot of time thinking. I don't give strong points of view to assert that it's the trunk, because that's unwise. So I will try to understand different points of view. I constantly look at views, and I'm challenging my thinking all the time. I'll give one crazy story of what I've done, and I do encourage everyone watching this to do it. I'm American, and the American politics is probably another K-drama series, because it's so dramatic and emotional, up and down. And I spent time on the KKK website. Do you know the KKK?
Yep.
So the KKK is a Ku Klux Klan, and they are a white supremacist group in the U.S. People might wonder, why am I going to the KKK website? Because I want to understand. I want to understand their point of view and their perspectives and why they feel so strongly about what they feel. And I think in society, if we were to stop and pause to think, not just from our head, but also from our hearts, what is it that connects us and what is it that separates us? I think that process of critical thinking is extremely important for humanity and for human flourishing, actually, going back to the main topic. And so I spend time being uncomfortable. It makes me very uncomfortable to read certain articles. It makes me very uncomfortable to watch certain videos, but I force myself to watch them so that I can understand perspective, and then I can critique it. What is it about what they said that I agree with? What is it that I don't agree with? Why do I disagree with that? And then I form my own points of view.
I think so. And I want to go back to say that you're absolutely right. You and your wife are absolutely right about identifying the thinking capacity, capabilities, strategies are somehow, something's happened and they're not being leveraged, they're not being tapped into, they're not being utilized well. And I consistently see when I work with organizations that successful leaders, or a successful leadership trait, is systems-wide thinking. not just thinking about your own department or your own company or your own sliver of whatever, but it's how does this work in this entire system? What's going on outside the system that's impacting it? So that's and critical thinking along with those lines too. So there's critical thinking that needs to happen. And some people are just about all the positive things that are going to happen. And some people are just preparing for all the negative things that are going to happen. And some people are just too busy collecting information about everything that they don't then move to a decision and action. So it's how do we balance all this stuff? How do we make it all fit together and work together in an integrated worldview that will help us to better understand the world and show up better in the world, so that we know that we are not missing out on anything, and that we're basically being inclusive. It's really about inclusivity of all the diverse different energies and powers and styles that exist, so that we can always show up at our best and be the best person that we can be.
How have you been growing your thinking over the years?
It is diminishing, isn't it? I feel like the more social media we have, the more we almost use that to numb and not think. And I notice when I do that too, and that's not helpful. The moments where I feel like I have the greatest thinking are when I get to have conversations like this, and I get to meet different people and hear about their experiences, or I listen to a podcast. I love to listen when I'm walking in the woods, and I come back with all of these ideas and things that I want to pay attention to and learn about. And so the positive is you get all this thinking. The negative is you have to make sure you're listening to different voices and getting exposure, so you're getting a broad perspective. But that's the plus side, I guess, of the social media age that we're in today. Podcasts are almost the listening to the radio the way that was in, however many years ago. And so there's such a wealth of insight and information and perspective that can be gained from that.
I totally agree with you, and thanks for sharing your secret.
And I'll just clarify that question, right? So I look at it a little bit differently, right? So it's not about improving our ability to think, because our ability to think can improve when we learn, when we open ourselves to different perspectives, engage with people who are different than us, right? But I look at it more from, can we improve our ability in how we behave? Right? So when we have a thought, we may not be able to stop our thinking. We may not be able to improve our thought. We may not be able to change each other's thoughts or behavior, or thoughts or the way that people think. But how am I changing or helping people change their behavior? And so that we can do. We can help give people guardrails and boundaries and different ways of thinking about things, so they change their behavior. And as people change their behavior, their thoughts also change, right? So if you think about like a bad habit, you have a bad habit. Let's say, for example, you eat a lot when you're stressed out, right? I do that. Sometimes when I'm stressing out, I have a tendency to overeat, right? So I know that bad habit of mine. And so what I do is, when I know that I'm feeling stressed out, I have to be aware that my automatic reaction, because of the way that my thoughts are in my brain work, is go eat. It's going to be, I can't stop that thought. It just comes there, right? So I can't change the way that my brain thinks that way. But what I can do is improve my habits, my reaction to that thought. So when I know that I'm stressed out, what am I going to do? Instead of going and eating 20 chocolate chip cookies, which would be what I would love to do, I'll go do 20 minutes on the treadmill. Right? So I've had to replace that bad habit with a behavior, a more positive behavior. And so as I do that, I would hope that my thinking improves to say, okay, exercise is going to improve my thinking. It's going to improve the serotonin, all the chemicals in my brain, and that hopefully will change my thoughts. Right? So I kind of look at it from the flip perspective. How can I change my behaviors to change my thinking, versus how do I change people's thinking to change their behaviors?
It's the same. It's going to start up with the hold off, right?
So
yes.
Wow. Okay. How have you been improved your ability to think over the years?
3 ways: read to think, write to think, and network to think. So first of all, you need to read, which does not mean 1 book per week, but at least, let's say, 2 books per year at least. So you need to nurture your thinking with novel ideas, also outside your field of expertise. So but just by reading, you definitely can absorb novel ideas and approaches. The second, as I was saying, is writing. So when I was at Harvard Business School as a young case writer and research assistant, I experimented firsthand the power of writing. So put down in writing your thoughts and how powerful this can be in refining your thinking and spotting, let's say, overlooked items, asking yourself new questions. And the third point is about networking. So don't close yourself in a silos. Exchange as much as possible, converse as much as possible with others. We tend to say that we don't have time to read, to write, and to network. Well, maybe it's time to make the time for reading, for writing, and for networking.
I really believe that that reading books, reading good books and taking them seriously and talking about them with other people is the key. The college where my husband was a professor is a college called St. John's College. They have campuses in Santa Fe and in Annapolis, Maryland. And they're the original Great Books School. Their curriculum is a Great Books curriculum, which means that everybody reads actual books, not textbooks, but you start with the Greeks, you start with Homer, and you move on through the Greeks to the Romans to through the Middle Ages and reading Thomas Aquinas and then the Enlightenment and on. And it's all the undergraduate program is all Western thinkers, obviously, but the key is that you're reading actual books. There's no lecture, and the teaching style is all seminar style. So everybody's reading a book together, and it's led by the professors or tutors, and they lead the dialogue about the book. And I sound like I'm giving an advertisement for St. John's, but really I'm advocating for the reading of great texts and talking about them with like-minded people as a way to improve not only our ability to think, but our ability to think together.
Together. Wow.
In collaboration with other people.
Beautiful.
It's when you confront her with something, it's kind of like question it. And a good way to question something is to say why. And with an answer to that, say why again. And an answer to that, say why again. And like 5 whys is a well-known technique for helping yourself to think. So just questioning stuff. And the other big one I would say that I know salespeople don't do this enough. Give yourself time to think. Thinking is a really valuable thing to do. But sometimes, and funnily enough, this is one of the challenges that I talk about and why I wrote the first book. Salespeople have this busy attitude. They go running around, they're doing lots of stuff. Oh, rush, yeah, doing. But the stuff they're doing often isn't work. And because it doesn't work, they have to do more.
There's many ways that I continue to grow my thinking. So first and foremost, I'm a lifelong learner. If I could go back to school today, I would. And study, lots of things that I'm so curious about. So I think the primary way that I grow my thinking is to continue to be learning and reading and talking with people and asking questions. And, I'm so fortunate to be part of a couple of professional groups that allow me to do that with some amazing colleagues. One of those is the Marshall Goldsmith 100 Coaches, which is where, I get to learn and share and grow and evolve with, the amazing, counterparts in that organization. Another is the Recognized Expert Group that Dory Clark founded. I have some amazing colleagues there who, we, get to talk about and learn from and share, on a variety of topics, not just leadership. And I think that brings me to my second point, which is, the more that I can continue to learn and grow my knowledge in different areas, the more it helps me think differently about leadership and continue to inform my thinking so that it gives me a different way to look at it. So I continue to, for example, I continue to learn ballroom dance. And I continue to compete in ballroom dance, which gives me another way of, looking at leadership, right? I continue to travel so that I'm continually exposed to new things and different things. And I'm looking at what I know as normal through a different lens, which gives me a way to think about it. And I think, just surrounding myself with people who challenge me with amazing questions like you just asked, also help me grow and continue to push that thinking. And that is, as hopefully a thought leader in this space of leadership going forward, that is what I hope to still bring to this space, a different way to think about this and a different way for people to think about their actions and their behaviors and their beliefs and how those are shaped to create how they show up in the world.
Beautiful. And thanks for sharing. Having you on the show, I want to ask this question. How have you been helping yourself to grow your ability to think over the years, Lisa?
Well, during the last year and a half, I've really given myself the time to write. And I give myself breaks to do things that I need to do to recuperate. I'm fortunate that I am financially in such a place that I can pick and choose what I want to do. I wasn't always in that position. But what I've done is I've recognized that today, later in my life, I am. And so I run really, really, really fast. I exhaust myself when I do a turnaround. I actually give myself time off after that turnaround to sink in and do my mental recharge. And for me, mental recharging is finding things that intellectually stimulate me. Like I said, I'm a big reader, so being able to read and write is actually how I process information and come up with my next plan.
Wow. How have you been growing your ability to think over the years?
Yes, I think that when I go back and I think about the studies that I did, I mentioned to you I've been an avid reader for as long as I can remember. I had a trunk full of audiobooks back when I was first getting started many, many years ago. And I never really stopped, just consuming as much as I could. And now today that takes the form of books and articles and blog posts and Substack and Reddit and anything I can get my hands on. But I would say that there was a time when my reading was much more technical. I was reading about the strategy and technology and process and operations in these things. I was reading business books, trying to round out my technical abilities. But more recently, I've started to balance that. I still read those things to stay current, but I do a lot more philosophical reading outside of the business literature and find ways to bring them in. So every morning I have a practice. I wake up early. I wake up about 4:30 a.m. my local time, and I immediately sit down and I read from either scriptures or text or ancient philosophical works about the structure of the universe or the nature of reasoning or our relationship with ourselves or the nature of fear or whatever it might be. And I don't read for very long. It's probably about 20 minutes, but it's enough to give me perspective for the rest of my day. I follow that up with 20 minutes of meditation, and I follow that up with a good workout, ideally. And that helps me say that, for an hour or so of time, I've already, accomplished 3 of my important mantras: body like stone, mind like water, spirit like sky. Those are the 3 things I want to channel in my life. And so for me, when the morning is early and have good energy, those are the things that I like to do. So the nature of what I read and how it has affected my thinking has really expanded my mindset, so that I notice things I didn't notice before, and I've slowed down enough. And I think my thinking has benefited from both space and the nature of what I'm stuffing into my brain.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing that.